Hello friends, my name is Michelle Fondin. I'm the author of the two new books, Enlightened Medicine, Your Power to Get Well Now, and Chakra Healing for Vibrant Energy, exploring your 7 energy centers with mindfulness, yoga, and Ayurveda. And welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about something rather serious, but also very deep. So if you're not into deep today, then you can watch one of my other more fun videos, like on Disney World. But if you're into deep, we're gonna have a deep discussion here. We're gonna talk about staying grounded in your spirituality. In a few minutes, it's gonna make total sense to you why I'm producing this video today. So yesterday, in order to promote my book, Chakra Healing for Vibrant Energy, my publicist at New World Library set up a lot of radio and podcast interviews. So yesterday I had a really unpleasant experience. It was probably the most unpleasant experience I've had in over 25 years, believe it or not. I was thinking back, I'm like, I think the last time I had this utmost pleasant experience was I was in a French law school in my first year in a French law school, and it was oral exams, and they let most people into the law program, but by the end of the year, they weed out 90%. So there's a remaining 10%. And so they need to do that by being really hard on the students to try to weed out those 90% of the population, student population. And when I was thinking through this, I was like, wow, I haven't had this experience since that point. And that was well over 25 years ago. So I was being interviewed by someone who, and I'm not going to name any names, but it was someone who was extremely unpleasant, who conducted more of an interrogation than an interview. And she spent the entire time trying to outsmart me or prove that she was more spiritual or smarter or savvy than me, and just like trying to stump me on questions. And it was just, overall, it was just super, super unpleasant. And so it reminded me of a lot of people on their spiritual path when they're kind of awakening to this more spiritual side of things, but they haven't let go of a lot of the issues and problems and emotional stuff that they have, or the intellectual stuff that's going on in their life. And so they bring all of that into the spirituality, and that creates a lot of disharmony. And really, when you move up in your spirituality and you become more awake to your spirituality, it shouldn't be disharmonious. It should be more harmonious, meaning it creates more peace, more serenity, more connection, and it coalesces, as it's a word that I've been learning. I've been studying the Yoga Sutras for this next book that I'm writing, and I'm reading a lot about the Yoga Sutras. And so to coalesce means to bring together. And so when you open up in your spirituality, it's about agreement. It's about bringing together. It's about connection and welding together. So you're yoking together, like the word yoga, which means yoke or union. You're yoking together not only the parts of you that tend to be separate in your life, but also you're yoking together with other people, with the universe, with the divine. And so you're really using this as a yoking experience rather than creating arguments, creating conflict, creating disharmony. And oftentimes I hear stories of time and again of people creating this friction, this disharmony, and trying to outprove somebody else or trying to outsmart somebody else. And I even hear this in yoga circles. I mean, I often hear it in yoga circles where people are learning about the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, or they're learning more about Ayurveda, Ayurvedic medicine, or they're learning more about holistic healing, for example. And then as they're speaking, they speak with an air of being more elite, being superior than, being more knowledgeable than, having more vocabulary than the other people. And that's not what spirituality is about. It's not about outsmarting other people. In fact, it's the polar opposite of that. It's the polar opposite of trying to outsmart other people and show that you're more worthy than and greater than and more educated than, because it's not about education and intellect. It's about experience. So when you experience a spiritual awakening, No one can take that away from you. Therefore, you have nothing to prove because it's your direct experience with the divine. It's your direct experience with God. It has nothing to do with trying to prove or disprove or trying to outsmart other people or convince other people, because intellect is good. Intellect can help us understand concepts, but nothing can replace direct experience. So you can intellectualize something, but if you have direct experience, it's really hard to open up into greater levels of your own spirituality. Beware of those people that try to intellectualize spirituality, because that is not spirituality. That's education. And that's intellect. It's not a spiritual awakening. It's an intrigue for a spiritual awakening. Some people want to be intrigued into opening up to finding a greater spiritual awareness, but that intellectual piece does not replace actual spiritual awareness. So be careful. So to this end, I'm going to just share with you, whether you are a Christian or not. I happen to be Christian, but the Bible has amazing insight and advice. And I'm just going to read to you, to prove a point, because if there's one person who walked the earth, who was the most humble, who showed the most humility, and who was the most spiritually awakened person on the planet ever in all time, it was Jesus. And here is Jesus's advice on the matter, which it's pretty darn amazing that this came to mind when I was thinking about my experience yesterday. So it says, watch out. This is Matthew chapter 6. Watch out. Don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven. When you give to someone in need, don't do as the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogues and streets to call attention to their acts of charity. I tell you the truth, they have received all the reward they will ever get. But when you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Give your gifts in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you. When you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who love to pray publicly on street corners and in the synagogues where everyone can see them. I tell you the truth, that is all the reward they will ever get. But when you pray, go away by yourself, shut the door behind you, and pray to your Father in private. Then your Father who sees everything will reward you. When you pray, don't babble on and on as other people and other religions do. They think their prayers are answered merely by repeating their words again and again. Don't be like them, for your Father knows exactly what you need even before you ask him. And I'm skipping down to the bottom of the chapter. And when you fast, don't make it obvious, as the hypocrites do, for they try to look miserable and disheveled, so people will admire them for their fasting. I tell you the truth, that is the only reward they will ever get. But when you fast, comb your hair and wash your face. Then no one will notice that you are fasting, except your Father who knows what you do in private. And your Father who sees everything will reward you. So this comes directly from Jesus, from the Prince of Peace. And the prime example of spirituality, spiritual awakening, and being the divine. And this prime example shows that you don't have to show off and be more knowledgeable than others. You don't have to convince others of anything. And in fact, Jesus didn't convince anybody of anything. He told stories. He was compassionate. He was loving. He was kind. He spoke words of truth. He never lied. He was the prime example of what it is like to live an awakened life. It doesn't matter if you're on a spiritual journey. If you believe that you're superior to anybody else, then that is the antithesis of spirituality and spiritual awakening. And just be careful. Be careful not to enter into arguments with people who claim to be on a spiritual path, yet they're trying to argue with you or disprove or show conflict or show superiority. Just be wary of those people, because those people are not truly on a spiritual path, because the first step on a spiritual path is openness and humility and showing a willingness to learn and be open, and a willingness to bow down in reverence to the divine, but also to show that you are not more than other people, that you are not more important than others. And so that's really what it means to have that spiritual awakening. It's about mimicking the life of the greatest man that ever lived on the earth, and who was not only man, but who was equally God, and who still is and always will be. And that is the prime example of a spiritually awakened person. So when you stay grounded, it means that you are open and you are compassionate and you're forgiving and you're loving and you're kind. And, you know, when those people cross your path that aren't not only on a spiritual path, but maybe they might be on a very cantankerous path, that you can just allow them to be who they are, but maybe not engage in the conversation with them, and maybe not even want to be around them. And certainly not trying to defend your point of view, because if you try to defend your point of view in that instance, and this is something that I was really trying to get out of this interview, actually, and I'm like typing to my publicist as I'm going through this interview because I'm trying to figure out what to do with this. It's almost better just to kind of look the other way, just go the other way, turn the other cheek, as Jesus did, and not engage. And if you disengage, then you can go about your path peacefully, and you don't need to confront these people who are supposedly being spiritual or supposedly on a spiritual path. And this can come from anywhere. It doesn't mean like, oh, it has to come from a Christian or a fellow Christian, or it can come from any belief system. It can come from any religion. It can come from any spiritual path-oriented person who is going towards some sort of spiritual awakening. And like I said, I'm a big part of the yoga meditation world, and I see it happen a lot there. And I've seen it happen even when I was in interviews with my first book, The Wheel of Healing with Ayurveda, where I was explaining how I was able to take the difficult information of Ayurveda and try to make it more practical and applicable and simple for people to follow. The interviewer even was trying to challenge me, saying like, well, I've been studying Ayurveda and I do a pretty good job of that, but like no one can claim to know a lot about Ayurveda. And I was just like, what's the point of that? Like, what is the point of even saying something like that? I think that when you present yourself, part of that is your integrity. When you're on a spiritual path, let your actions and let your being show and shine through versus your words. And let your words be simple. Let your words be open and loving and compassionate. And I even see this again in Christian circles where they just have memorized Bible verses and then they just like spout them off like, oh, look at me, like I just memorized these Bible verses, and so I'm just going to talk in parables, or I'm going to talk with Bible verses. And that makes a lot of people feel really uncomfortable, and it's not good to show off. As Matthew chapter 6 said, that it's not good to show off. It's not good to show that, you know, oh, I'm a good student of the Bible, or I'm a good student of Christianity, or I'm a good student of Judaism. It's not the way that Jesus was. It's not the way that a great spiritually awake person is to act. The idea of this connection or coalescing, the idea of bringing together versus separating, is more about finding those common connections with other people that you can enter into their heart through those common connections. So spirituality is never about division. It's always about connection. And so just keep that in mind as you're going along your spiritual journey, and you will have much greater success on not only your spiritual path, but helping others awaken to their own spiritual path. So thank you so much for joining me. Thanks for subscribing to my channel below. Please share this video with friends, family, and your dog. And thank you for pledging your support on Patreon. I couldn't do this without your pledge and support. www.patreon.com/Michelle S. Fondin. And I will see you in the next video.